CyberDark is a cyberpunk-themed tabletop RPG based on the rule set of ShadowDark by Kelsey Dion of the Arcane Library, developed through a collaboration between Lightfish Games, Epic Party Games, and Lichdom College. This game reimagines the old-school role-playing experience in a high-tech, high-risk urban dystopia. The game invites players to take on the role of dark runners, freelance operatives navigating a world dominated by powerful corporations, mercenaries, and street gangs. The game is crowdfunding on Kickstarter at the time of this recording. I'll leave a link below to where you can find it. In this video, I just want to walk you through the free quick start so we can unpack the essence of this game, then share with you my personal opinion of the project so far, as well as my wish list for the final version of this game when it is eventually released. Let's jump right in. I think if you've been watching my channel over the years, you've watched me review maybe 10 or 12 cyberpunk RPGs at this point. And if you're a fan of the genre, you've probably played or at least read a good handful of them yourself. Here's the thing, there is very little new ground that is covered with these games, but massive innovations in the genre are really not the point anymore. The magic of any new cyberpunk RPG comes from the nuances of its rules, as well as how to present itself aesthetically. And in that sense, CyberDark is pretty good. I'll show you what I mean. In this game, you play as dark runners. You and your crew will crack firewalls, raid data vaults, and fight augmented bad guys. None of that is even close to new. The rules are based on ShadowDark's mix of old school and 5e D&D, all deeply simplified for fast play and more intuition-based GMing. Also, nothing new there. But here we go, this is where things start to get interesting. If you're not familiar with ShadowDark, one of its big gimmicks, or conceits, to put it more politely, is that characters usually find themselves in a pitch black dungeon or other environment, and they have a limited number of torches or other expendable sources of light which run out in real time at the table. And anytime characters find themselves in the dark, enemies will take advantage and things get particularly deadly. The analog to torches in CyberDark is the Mine Canary Firewall, which is described as a small biosynthetic animal bred to be a decoy to enemies and itself emits a sort of protective radius around characters. And they last for, you guessed it, 1 hour. Mechanically, these MCFs are identical to torches, but the thematic dressing around them is an impressive translation to cyberpunk. I did notice that the game had some places in the rules that might make it a pretty lenient affair for players, like ammunition, for example. Weapons that use ammo or fuel don't even need to be reloaded until you roll a natural 1 on a d20 when attacking. And even then, you just expend 1 magazine or fuel canister or whatever, and then you can keep firing away. I found that to be particularly generous. And then when dual wielding any ranged weapon, if you roll a 1 and need to reload, it actually still just costs 1 action to reload both weapons, the same requirement as reloading 1 weapon. By the way, I thought this was pretty fun. In this early quick start we're looking at, they don't have all of the artwork finished yet, so they slapped a loading icon and message on the draft illustration. I really appreciate these tightly written weapons tables that carry all these abbreviations for special properties. It's all just very tidy. Okay, so instead of casting spells in this game, certain characters can cast glitches. A glitch occurs in the so-called CyberDark, this digital overlay that pervades all of meat space and which is increasingly infested with evil AI and other baddies. Anyway, you codecast in generally the same way that you might cast a spell, by rolling a d20 plus your intelligence modifier. The DC to meet or exceed starts at 10 plus the tier of the glitch you're attempting, which ranges from 1 to 5. A failure on this casting roll means that you can't attempt it again until after a rest. A nat 20 means you double its effect, and a nat 1 means you have to roll on one of the glitch mishap tables. The mishaps for tier 1 and 2 glitches here are not particularly devastating, but I imagine in the full game that the mishaps for the higher tier glitches could really stop a character in their tracks. The quick start only gives you 7 tier 1 glitches to cast. I don't actually have any complaints about these spells. In fact, I have to commend the designers for writing them in such a way that they're all potentially very useful and carry with them easily identifiable utility in one way or another. I think I'm still just mildly traumatized by years of Dungeons & Dragons cantrips and first level spells, which are composed of so many useless or edge case effects. But if I'm being honest, one thing I didn't find very useful here were the 3 alignments in the game: liberty, control, and survival. There doesn't seem to be any mechanic or even notion of a rule that rewards or punishes acting in accordance with your alignment. If these are just a vestige of the original CyberDark rules, I think they should either be fleshed out into a mechanic or dropped altogether. Cyberware is pretty fun in this game. I think in a lot of cyberpunk RPGs, the designers feel like they need to get at least a little bit complicated in the mechanics of the gear and in the installation of it. It just seems very straightforward though in this game. You have slots for cyberware and you can just fill the slot with an implant that has a benefit. That's it. Well, it gets even more generous and interesting in a way. You can gather cyber junk through the course of play and make a check to see if you can forge your own implants or other gear. You just kind of need enough units of generic scrap and hundreds of credits and 1 or a few hours, and you can make any implant on the list. It's so simple and player friendly that I'm sure some old school players might reflexively reject this approach, requiring more grit and pain before their character could make an item for themselves like this. But as we've seen, this game is very generous to players, and this crafting mechanic is just par for the course. Now, the actual death mechanic is not really any more or less forgiving than CyberDark's. At 0 HP, you start dying and roll 1d4 plus your con modifier to see how many more rounds you have left to live. On each of those rounds, when it's your turn, you roll a d20 and pop up to 1 HP if you happen to roll a 20. Otherwise, without outside help, you die when you run out of rounds. There is no short rest in the game, just rests. And rests require 8 hours of quiet safety. If you're able to secure that for your character, then you're rewarded with full HP, recovered stat damage, all talents, glitches, and gear are reset to full. But check this out, you can link up to 3 of those MCFs to create a sort of rest bubble that lasts 8 hours, which is to say you can take 3 of these cyberpunk torches that normally last 1 hour each and connect them together to make an 8-hour protection field. The only thing is that it can't be moved once it's established, but they're obviously used for rests in the middle of relatively dangerous environments. Okay, so here are my thoughts so far on CyberDark. Cons. Layout is clean, but could be cleaner. I think the page design is really almost perfect in terms of readability. It's certainly more usable than a Mork Borg job, but they could probably go one step further and just drop the random katakana and fake advertisements that act as page fillers. These have a neat visual effect at a glance, but ultimately they're really hard on home printers in terms of toner and ink, and the Japanese doesn't even really fit the context of the page in some cases. Taking over PCs. One of the mid-level mooks called a Shadow Code, a type of AI demon that can only attack you inside the CyberDark, has an ability that takes over the target's body for 2d4 rounds. This is something I would absolutely veto at the table if I were a GM and would openly protest as a player. I don't like enemy abilities that remove agency from the player unless they are nuanced or attenuated in some way. Pros. Very generous rules. As I mentioned earlier, this game is really intent on giving players the experience of moving forward in a narrative and having lots of fun. Things like almost never having to reload, being able to reload 2 weapons at the same time at no extra cost, having cheap and easy mobile rest bubbles, and getting fully restored with a rest, not to mention ultra simple cybernetics, implants, and crafting, just all add up to a very clear intent by the authors to make this a fun and frictionless cyberpunk experience. It's not to say that this game is easy or you won't die. The GM can still pile on the enemies and fry you 15 different ways, but on its face, this game is not fully intent on killing you. Awesome art. There's not much that distinguishes cyberpunk games from one another, so art does end up being kind of important in this genre. It's one of the few distinguishing factors for any new entry into the genre. As for CyberDark, the illustrations are extremely cool, at least in my opinion. I find them to be evocative and fitting of the stark black and white motif that CyberDark has established. Character sheets. Credit probably goes to Kelsey Dion as much as the creators here for the simplicity of the character sheet, but it's not something I take for granted. This is the kind of game where you can get up and running in 15 minutes, which is an important feature these days where a lot of people don't have time for half a session of character creation or long moments during a session rooting through all their characters' skills and abilities. This is just a very straightforward cyberpunk experience. Wishlist. There are a few things that I'm hoping to maybe see in the final game. Flesh out alignment or drop it. I'd love to see a mechanic associated with the character's alignment that enforces behavior. Either go a step further and make alignment matter, or in the alternative, drop it from the game. A setting primer. Sometimes it seems like if you've read one cyberpunk setting primer, you've read them all, but I always like to give them a chance. And from the teaser info in this quick start, with this mother AI program being benevolent but suddenly disappearing, and demon AI creeping in from the CyberDark, I'm intrigued and would love to read a full setting backstory. Some hacking. Actually, I should be careful what I wish for. I guess my instinct is to be looking for a whole hacking mechanic so that players can engage in cyberspace encounters. But the more I think about it, the more I think that it might be kind of redundant in this case. The reason being, you're kind of always in cyberspace in this game. The CyberDark is sort of like a dark web that you physically venture into. It's not actually entirely clear how it works, but what is clear is that adding a hacking minigame would overlap with the fact that you're almost always in a state of hacking already. So maybe I don't wish for that. So where does that leave us with CyberDark? It's not reinventing the cyberpunk wheel, and it doesn't need to. What it appears to be offering is a streamlined, player-friendly experience that's trying pretty hard to steer around any kind of crunch or complicated mechanics. For Shadowdark and more casual RPG fans looking to jack into a cyberpunk world, CyberDark looks like it could hit just the right note of fast neon action. If you're interested, check out the Kickstarter link below. And hey, the quick start is free, so you've got nothing to lose by giving it a look. Thanks as always for watching. I'll see you in the next one.